Hey guys, hope you're all having a great day. So welcome to our very first, I believe, snow day garden tour. So it is about the first or second week of January at this point, right before I go back up to school. And we got about 6 inches of snow the other day. It's actually kind of warm today, about like 40 degrees. So you might hear a lot of melting in the background, a lot of water dripping from the gutters. But before all the snow melts, I just wanted to show you what our house looks like in the wintertime. So here I am at my mom's. We're at house number 1, so I'm going to include both houses in this video. So right now I'm standing on the front steps, and we took down all the Christmas decorations, and you can see right behind me we have these 2 trees that are set up. They're artificial trees, but they do have lights on them, so we still have those up for the winter time, having the lights on a timer, and it's a nice simple look. So I really love those. We'll keep them up until March or so, until we put some spring plants in there, like some pansies, maybe another set of hellebores, something like that. And then off to the left here, we have this container, which I actually did not create. We got it from actually one of the grocery stores, believe it or not. And it's a really, really pretty arrangement, and it has this like wired lights on it. You can bring it a little bit closer too and get a good look at all this stuff that's on here, because there's a lot of texture, a lot of stuff like here. A lot of different branches and everything. Come take a look from the front too, because that's actually the back of it. So we've got this right here, and this looks really pretty at night. Actually, I'll throw a picture of what it looks like at nighttime. There's another pot back here, which we have the spotlight on the house, and it's obviously covered in some snow right now, so you can't see everything, but that looks really pretty. Let's take a walk this way through all the snow here. And we have a lot of like evergreens have been planted in the front here. And for some reason, I think this actually has been eaten by like a deer that maybe comes by our house or something. So I'm sure it'll grow fine in the spring, but looking a little strange for right now. Over here, we've got some hellebores, which are buried by snow, but I want to show you this up and close over here. So you can see this right here. There actually are some buds on this hellebore. There's another plant right over there, but that's pretty covered in snow. But I'm excited to see what the flowers are going to look like on this, probably in the next month or 2. Off to the left over here, we have a limelight hydrangea, which also, I think there was some animal or something that came through in like October and November, because look, an entire like branch came off of this tree, and the plant is fine. I don't think it's going to cause many issues to the tree, but it does change the structure of it a little bit. But you know, things like that happen, so there's really nothing you can do to control it. But it looks really pretty, especially with these beautiful dried flowers that are just blowing in the wind. So we'll keep it like this until maybe about March or April, and then we'll cut this back so that way it can have new growth for the springtime. Walking this way, this is what we worked on this past winter. We planted the limelights before, and we created this bed over here. So we have 2 grasses, 2 roses, and then an evergreen right here. So we're just going to leave those like that for the winter, and we'll cut those back like just like the limelight in the springtime. This rose, actually, they had flowers on them until like almost Christmas time, surprisingly. It really didn't cool down around here and get into like the teens, I would say, until the last couple of weeks. So it actually has been pretty warm for these roses, but they're looking really nice right now. And then you can see this evergreen here as well. This didn't do super hot transplanting from its container to this location for right now, but I think it's going to do okay for next year. It's mainly this branch that I'm focusing on. If this doesn't grow back, then we'll cut it back and we'll kind of reshape this, and we'll restake up some other areas so it has some good structure to it. But it is really, really pretty, and I think once it really starts to fill in this space, it'll look nice. And I just noticed, I don't know who put this here, maybe it was my mom or somebody, but there's a little gnome down here at the bottom, which is really cute. So anyways, we have that. Another rose, like I said. I also want you to zoom in on this too, because this is really pretty rose hip right here, kind of like an orange color. So these are the knockout roses. They have like a pinkish color flower, but there's a couple of rose hips on them. Not a lot, but there's a few of them on there. And that's pretty much it for this area in the front yard. So we'll head to the backyard now. A little bit of snow here. And honestly, not too much to look at in the backyard. It's mainly because we're trying to focus on the front yard and get that kind of established first before we do a lot in the backyard. But we do have some exciting plans coming for the springtime for the backyard. I think we're going to plant maybe a tree or 2 in the back just to kind of add some more bone structure to the yard. So definitely stay tuned for that. So I'm excited about what's going to happen with that. Over here, not a lot to look at except for some cat footprints. But this is left over from the hibiscus plant that I'm sure you might remember from the summertime. So it's just sticks for now, but we're gonna cut that back and it'll grow some nice fresh growth and some really large flowers this upcoming spring and summer. And then you can kind of see here, there's a hump here and a hump here. I'm sure a lot of you are curious about my banana plants. So this is what they look like in the wintertime. There's not really much to them, and the reason that there's humps there is because we do mulch them in the winter with leaves and grass clippings and other stuff like that. So they've got a large pile on there that's helping them stay warm, and the snow actually helps keep them warm as well. So besides that, we'll just take a quick walk over here. Sorry for any background noise too. We live in the suburbs, so there's a lot of, background noise, dogs in the background, but, it's nice to have some neighbors pretty close by. And there really isn't much to look at over here, but you can see how pretty this birch tree looks in the wintertime. It put on a little bit of growth last year, but I think now with this being its third year in the ground, it's really going to start to grow this year. And I'm going to keep up on spraying with an organic fungicide and insecticide, so that way this doesn't have too many issues this year, hopefully. But the other thing that's planted with this birch, which I did already cut back actually, one of the only things that I did cut back in the fall, are the denim and lace Russian sage. So it's just little tiny sticks right now. We've got 1, 2, 3, and a fourth plant, which you really can't even see back there, that are there. So those will grow nice and large this year. Nothing else really in the back over here, but we are thinking about maybe putting a tree back here to add some more structure. So I'm excited about that for this next year. Heading back this way, really not anything to see on the deck over there. We didn't do anything in terms of like winter containers or anything back there, so that's pretty much just going to stay like that. But we have this stuff over here, which is technically our neighbor's yard, but we get that view over here as well. So there's some nice evergreen structure with the yew and a couple juniper bushes, so still is nice to see. But we're going to head back to the front yard. All right, so in the front yard, there's another juniper bush here, and then I thought that these bushes were the yellow flowering bush. I can't think of the name right now. I thought that's what this row of bushes were, and I think there's 1 or 2 of those that are mixed in, but I didn't cut them at all last year because I wanted to make sure that they'd be able to bloom, and they never bloomed for some reason, so I ended up cutting them back after, like in the summertime, and just to tidy up the structure. So they seem to just have kind of green leaves on them, but nonetheless, it's still nice to have a little bit of privacy, and they add a nice screening to it. But that'll be taken care of. They'll grow quite a lot this year, so we'll have to cut those back as well. But we have this on the left here. We've got another hydrangea, and this one looks quite a bit different from the other one, just because this is actually a pretty shaded area. Right above our heads here is a honey locust tree, so that provides a lot of shade in the summertime, not so much in the winter, obviously. But this hydrangea still grows great in a more shade situation, but you could see the branches are quite a bit longer, and it actually grew quite a bit larger this year versus the other hydrangea. So I'd say this is a good plant if you want it in a shade and sun location, but they are going to grow a little bit differently. So we'll cut this back a little bit more in the springtime versus the other one, but nonetheless, it's still gorgeous in the wintertime. And I'll also throw up a picture on the screen of what these looked like when they still had snow on them, because it's been a few days since it snowed, but they're just like one of the prettiest plants that are not evergreen that you can have in the wintertime. And then besides that, there's really not much else for this yard. We have this tree here, which seems to hold on to its seeds over the winter time, which it could be a good thing or a bad thing, but it's nice to have a little extra texture in the tree besides just the bare branches. But this is a nice smaller tree, a little more ornamental, but it's definitely growing in size. I think before we moved here, they used to trim this tree back every year, but we haven't trimmed it once because I want to just let it grow, and it's a lot of work to cut an entire tree back. So this will continue to grow. And it actually, I gotta say, looking like at all of the little seed heads that are dropping down and seeing everything in the distance, it's actually really pretty seeing our stuff here. Well, we got some mail, but the last area I wanted to show is this area right in the front over here. So we have a row of boxwoods right here. I don't know the variety of boxwoods, but they don't get much larger than this. I just kind of keep them in somewhat of a spherical shape. So there's 5 of those right there. We have I believe this is a Crimson Queen Japanese maple, and that's really pretty. It does hold on to some of its leaves during the winter time, but it's gorgeous in the summertime. It's beautiful for this space. And then again, we have the same euonymus bushes, and then also the other evergreen. I can't think of the name of that either right now, but kind of doing the same thing on the other side. And then last thing, which is kind of buried over here, is this hydrangea. This is one of the endless summer hydrangeas that we got. Actually, it's like a housewarming plant, which was funny. It's a little bit buried now because we have to put our snow here from when we shovel from the driveway, but it'll come back nice and large in the springtime. So besides that, that's pretty much all we have for this house. But now, in about 2 seconds, we're going to take you over to my dad's house, and we'll show you everything over there. All right, so we are at house number 2, starting off on the left side of our front yard. This we decided to do last year. So this is the row of the Castle Spire hollies. So these are absolutely gorgeous, and I just noticed they have berries on them. I don't think I ever noticed that before. Here, want to get closer in on this? Look at these berries. That's so gorgeous. So these will hopefully grow quite a bit this year. They kind of just held in their place for last year. And the only thing, I don't know if I ever mentioned this after we made that original video, these are all female hollies except for the end right here, which is a male. But I think we're going to add another male to the front, or maybe add a couple more and then a male to make this a little bit longer this year, because for every 5 female Castle Spire hollies, you need the Castle Wall male to go with it. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 females, so it just won't get as good pollination. So anyways, that's something else that we're going to work on for this year. There's nothing else really back in this area except for a few hostas that line the back of this fence and then this large yew. However, I gotta talk to my dad about this to see what we're planning on doing, but either this year or next year, this is actually going to be taken out. We're eventually going to put other stuff back here and fill in this area, but this will help with getting a lot more sun into the backyard for our row of arborvitaes, which will be at the end of this video. I'll show you that row. But this is probably one of the larger things that we're going to be working on. So heading over this way, this view hasn't really changed much since we moved in, and that's just because we've been trying to focus on the backyard, kind of opposite to my mom's house, focusing on the front yard first. But eventually, all of these bushes that you see in the front will be ripped out, and also potentially this tree. But for now, they will suffice. We'll keep that 80s style going, I guess, when everybody put yews in their front yard. So we have all of this here. We put a couple perennials in this front area, but those kind of, they go back to the ground every year, so you don't really see anything now. And then over here, we do actually still have our Christmas lights up here. We just haven't had a chance to, and now that there's snow on the ground, it makes it a little bit harder to take them down. So they'll stay up for now. But around this pole, we have, again, these are the denim and lace Russian sage. I really like it, so I figured I'd repeat the same thing. Okay, so at this point, the wind was actually getting really bad that it would actually cut out my voice because the wind was just so strong. So I have to do a voiceover for the rest of this. But anyways, at this point in the video, I was just mentioning about how I planted this denim and lace Russian sage, but I never actually got a chance to cut that back, which is fine. You don't have to cut it back in the fall. You can cut it back in the spring. But anyways, we're going to move on to the next section. So I was also just mentioning that we don't typically have this many cars parked in our driveway. We just had a lot of family over at that time when making this video. But moving on to the other side, this was actually one of the newer beds that we had created. So this is creating a border between our driveway and our neighbor's yard. So this tree that I'm pointing at right here is a forest pansy redbud. It has been in the ground for about 2 years, so this year it should really start to grow and get quite a bit larger than it is. And you can see that we also have some Christmas lights that are still on it. Underneath it were some blue fescue grasses that I actually planted. I started from seed through winter sowing, which was a really fun project. This other plant is a Daisy May daisy from Proven Winners. It's obviously looking a little dead right now, but that could use a fresh cut in the spring. And then we've got a limelight hydrangea right there. The blooms look absolutely incredible in the winter, and that is just the regular shrub variety as compared to the tree variety at my mom's. There's a lamb's ear in the back over there, and then that is the tiny wine 9-bark. It is the smaller version to the summer wine 9-bark, which I will show you actually later in this video, but it fits in that space really well. This is a Weeping Colorado Blue Spruce, which provides a lot of evergreen interest, and then I think that's some columbine that is planted underneath it, but some other perennial that I did through the winter sowing method. So we just tried to fill up this small space as much as we possibly could to create some sort of border without it just being like a hedge of one type of plant. So like we did the hollies on one side just to make it nice and simple, but there's a little bit more interest to look at. The last thing are those 3 grasses. They are the Carl Forster Calamagratis grasses, not glasses. I think I said the same thing when we recorded this too. But those look really pretty. Again, all these plants except for that first tree were actually in their first year, so they're going to grow quite a bit. This tree on the corner here is a river birch tree, and it is an absolutely gorgeous tree, especially in the winter, because you can see all this peeling bark that gives a lot of interest to look at, by it not necessarily being evergreen, you know? And it has a deep orange color as compared to a lot of just like white birches. Over here, next to the right of that green, well, evergreen, are actually black-eyed Susans. Now, those black-eyed Susans actually are getting a little shaded out now, so we're going to have to move those next year. And then we also have, flanking that entrance, are two Hinoki cypresses. So those add some nice evergreen interest, and they've actually grown quite a bit in the last couple of years. Those have been in the ground for maybe 2 or 3 years at this point. And then to the back over in that corner, which is a little hard to see just because it's further in the distance, is actually a pussy willow. I'm not sure if there's a particular variety or if it's just the traditional type, but about in a month or so after this video is posted, that's when its catkins are going to pop open, and that's when this plant is going to be in its prime. I actually did a video of harvesting a lot of those catkins last year and making a nice arrangement out of it, and I'm certainly going to do the same thing this year as well, as long as I'm home from school. Moving to the backyard, you can see on either side of me, they're a little hard to see right now because they're pretty bare, but there are two Sensation honeysuckles from Proven Winners. We just planted these actually in the summer of last year, so they really didn't have much of a chance to grow. But where this trellis and this opening is where these vines are going to grow over. They're not a crazy invasive vine. They're not going to get really huge, but they're going to provide a lot of interest for that trellis, and they have beautifully smelling flowers. And they also bloom from about late spring to early fall, or at least late summer. So they bloom for a really long portion of the growing season, which is incredible. So it's awesome to have something like that for you to walk through and be able to smell those flowers. Next thing I'm pointing out over here is this row of green giant arborvitaes. This has been an interesting experiment for us because this is actually our second row of green giant arborvitaes. And these we planted in March of 2020, right as the pandemic was beginning actually. And they were very small when we first planted them. I'm actually going to throw a picture on the screen if I can find it of what these originally were like. And for size reference, I'm about 5'7", 5'8", so not very tall. And you can see this arborvitae that I'm standing next to is actually taller than me, like at least 6 feet tall. And they have grown at least like 2 or 3 feet just last year, just being in the ground. And then the other important thing that I wanted to mention is you can see that there's that brown wooden fence that goes in a separate direction from the row of those arborvitaes. And the reason why is because that brown fence was actually not put on the property line. So in between that space where the arborvitaes and the fences is actually our neighbor's yard. So we wanted to correct that issue when we planted these arborvitaes, and most likely this year we're actually going to take down that wooden fence and put in a black chain link fence. And further in the video, I'll show you an example of what that black chain link fence will look like, because we did the exact same thing on the other side. So it's better off to just correct an issue so that way, you know, if we move out or our neighbors move out, there's no issues with any property lines. Next to that, we're going over to these raised beds, which we just put in last spring. We still have all the plants there, and we just didn't really have a lot of time, especially with me going to school and everything, to take care of a lot of the plants. But as I am editing this now, a lot of the snow's already melted, so I can go out this week and clean everything. We had a rosemary plant that actually still had some life in it, so if I can kind of cover that up well, then it might survive throughout the winter. If not, it's okay. We can start some more rosemary. But the rest of these we'll be cleaning up, and in the springtime, we'll be planting some vegetables in there. So I'm really excited to put some more stuff in there. That was our first year using raised bed, or using the raised beds to grow stuff in. So, you know, we found what works, what doesn't work, and we'll continue on from that point. Back over behind these raised beds, something that's super interesting is I planted 4 plants of Supertunia Vista bubblegum. These were incredible plants, but now even in January in a zone 6B, these actually still have life to them. They are still green, which is incredible. I don't think they're going to make it throughout the winter, especially because this week we're actually experiencing, I think it's a low of maybe about 5 degrees or so, which is pretty cold. Not anything we haven't seen before. That's pretty typical, but we'll see if it actually kills those plants. The rest of what you can see to the left of that, we have some zinnias that are left over from the summer. Definitely going to be doing a repeat of some zinnias next year because those are awesome. And then in front of them, another one of the winter sowing plants I did last year were called purple coneflowers, just the traditional type of purple coneflowers. You might also know them as echinacea. I planted those last year from seed, started them in January. However, they didn't bloom last year, so I'm looking forward to some blooms this year. This other plant that I'm pointing out is a lavender plant. I actually got it at Trader Joe's last maybe February, and I wanted to make sure that it was going to be able to make throughout the winter. So I guess I'm kind of figuring that out for this winter to make sure that it can survive in a zone 6, which I think we're all good with. Besides that, I'm just kind of explaining here that this entire bed we created last year. It's hard to tell where the grass ends and the bed begins, but it's a pretty wide bed, and we're gonna actually spend a lot of this year filling it up with stuff. But what I just stepped on is actually a clump of grass that I got from one of my friends. Not entirely sure if it's going to grow, especially because I didn't put it in the ground until December, but we will see if it does grow. There also was that pot of raspberries right there, and this tree that we transplanted last year is a dogwood. Now, I believe that it's a Kusa dogwood. It was left over from our old house, actually, when we moved back in 2016. I took it as like this tiny little seedling, and it's obviously a good size now. But I do believe that the flowers lasted quite a bit longer than a traditional dogwood, so that leads me to believe that it is a Kusa dogwood. We'll tell, or we'll be able to tell in the future, but until it flowers, we won't really be able to know. In this Monrovia pot over here is a tree that I started from seed, from one of those Johnstein companies, or the Johnstein company, like little kits that you can buy. So that is a ponderosa pine, which is actually found on the west coast. So it's cool having one of those trees on the east coast. But I started it in 2019, so this will be its third year that it's growing. And I'm super excited to watch it grow this year, especially now that it has like at least a little bit of size to it. It's gonna hopefully take off this year. And then this other plant over here is, like I mentioned before, this is the summerwine nine bark. So that tree is going to, or bush at least, is actually going to take up this entire space, and it's going to be on a pretty decent size as compared to that tiny vine. And then in front of it, we just have a couple heucheras. So those are really pretty, but I've had some issues with heucheras actually, so I'm hoping that I can correct that this year. To the side of this shed over here, we did create a very small planter bed, and we were talking about maybe putting in some like winterberry hollies or even just regular hollies as some evergreen interest. But it'd be really nice to have something there instead of just the bare side of the shed. Walking through, and you can see how much snow has melted because it's definitely not 6 inches anymore, just looking back at that. We have this euonymus bush over here, same type of plant that I had at my mom's in the front, but we transplanted that over last year too, and that plant will get a little big for the front of the shed, but it's going to, we can keep that in check with trimming it. I was just mentioning over here too that there's that yew you can see from the backyard, and we're going to be cutting that back. And the biggest reason why is because this is actually our first hedge of the green giant arborvitaes. So you can see these arborvitaes, they're not nearly as tall as the other ones. They look all right, but they don't look as like symmetrical as the other ones. And what's interesting is these arborvitaes have actually been in the ground a whole year longer than the other ones. We put this row of arborvitaes in the ground in 2019. However, this area gets a lot more shade, and because of that, these bushes have not been able to grow as fast. So we were talking about it, and we were thinking we didn't really love the look of the yew anyways, so hopefully getting rid of that, it'll give the bushes a lot more afternoon shade, and hopefully they'll start to grow a little bit faster. Nonetheless, they're still going to cover up that area. It's just going to take a little longer. The last area we have in this section is another pretty shaded area in our garden, but they're pretty covered up now with the plants that we have, but there's some lungworts. The brown spots that you see are actually a couple ferns. There's a few heucheras. This is a hydrangea, and I do believe this is the macrophylla variety because I have not been cutting this back except for cutting back those blooms in the springtime. And then to the side of that, we also have a couple Brunnera plants. So we're going to keep filling this up. I would love to add some more height into this shaded area to cover up a little bit more of that fence. But as we find plants, we'll add some more stuff in that area. So that's pretty much the entire area in the backyard. And one more thing on that row of arborvitaes, just going back to those, I just wanted to mention that the black chain link fence that I mentioned we're going to be putting on the other side, you can see exactly what our plan is. So it is a flexible fence, and these arborvitaes will actually grow right through them. But it would be nice to have the entire backyard fenced in because we actually don't have any dogs right now, but my dad was planning on getting a dog at some point in the near future. So just to make things easy and to future-proof the backyard, it'd be nice to have that fenced in. Because the arborvitaes they do provide a nice green screen and privacy for our neighbors, especially living with houses really close together. We want to have some privacy, but also having it fenced in will be nice so that way, letting dogs out, they don't need to run and go into other people's yards and all of that kind of stuff. So besides that, I just wanted to talk about a couple projects that were going on, but the main thing was just this. Last thing too, which maybe doesn't look the absolute best right now, but we have this sliding glass door that we put in. It used to just be a small window, but we have a sliding glass door, and I don't know if you can see Freddy in the reflection, but we've got our cat right here just staring at me. So there's Freddy. But you can see that it kind of leads out to nothing. So because of the pandemic and everything, the price of wood has been like insane, like 3 or 4 times the price that it has been. So we were planning on putting a deck on last year, but my dad was just waiting until the price of wood came down, and now it'll be a lot more approachable to build a deck. But I think that's something we're going to be working on this year. So we'll have a nice deck, not anything crazy big, but something here, and then eventually we'll actually put some small flower beds around that deck. So it'll be even more stuff to work on after that point. So besides that, a lot of talking, a lot of showing you everything that's going on. This was pretty much the entire snow day garden tour. You can see that the snow has already melted quite a bit, so there's not much left, but I wanted to just show you what it looked like before everything melted. And that is typically what happens in southern New England. We'll get storms, sometimes pretty big too, but it always warms up right after. Like it's 40 degrees today, and a lot of the snow is melting. But you enjoy it while it lasts, and that's pretty much all you can do. So besides that, I hope you guys like this video. I'll definitely be making some more garden tours in the future, and if you want to, subscribe to see what other stuff we're going to be working on this upcoming year. I'm really excited for the stuff that we're going to be doing, and also just watching the stuff grow that we've already planted, like these arborvitaes, the trees, and just a lot more fun projects coming up. So besides that, I will see you guys in the next video.